In this first video of the channel, I'm gonna tell you the reasons why we study history and how we study history not in a classroom setting but in a working setup. When I tell people I studied history, I receive different responses. Few people widen their eyes with admiration of long-lost tales of castles and kings. They may be history students or graduates themselves or liberal arts students or graduates. Most people, though, would tell me about their painful experience of memorizing names, dates, and events in order to pass a history course. If you are thinking of studying history but you are still unsure about it, continue watching this video to enlighten yourself. Many people choose practical program to study such as engineering, computer science, accountancy, or business administration. Those fields could give them money. But there are still a few people devoting 4 years up to 12 years studying and practical programs. Let's take history, for example. Why do many people still study history despite being impractical? History students and teachers might say that learning history is akin to exciting time travel. They have got to know about ancient civilizations and ancient tales that amuse and, sometimes frighten people in one way or another. Look at the renewed fascination of the Americans in the ancient Egyptian civilization upon the release of the movie The Mummy, 1999. Second, history makes us understand the present. Take Russia for example. It was invaded by many groups of people, the Mongols, the French, and the Germans. That led to its militarist culture at the establishment of the Soviet Union. Also, that led to the Warsaw Pact with other communist countries during Cold War. These countries served as the first line of defense against invaders. Lastly, that led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine to stop the country from joining NATO, the enemy of the defunct Warsaw Pact. History also trains us to appreciate our humanity. We may live a life so different 10 or 20 years ago, but we still experience human emotions and problems similar to the past. History serves as a guide for us to understand people, not to judge them. Let's take Vincent van Gogh, for example. He did not feel successful during his days. Also, he had many psychological conditions. Despite those problems, he is now considered an acclaimed artist in his paintings such as The Starry Night. Lastly, history trains our critical thinking skills. It makes us scrutinize the information we are reading. Let's take history books such as Ecclesiastical History of the English People by the Venerable Bede. It was a great history book during medieval England, but it has pro-Christian biases that it does not tell us about the controversies inside the English Catholic Church. History trains our brains to read between the lines. If my reasons sound convincing enough, you are now confronted with this question: how do we study history? Auguste Comte said that historians must study history as scientists do. He said that history follows a certain pattern akin to the natural laws of science. Because of that, he believed that historians must find such laws of history. He claimed, therefore, that history is objective. On the other end of the spectrum, Robin George Collingwood regarded history as, and I quote, the reenactment of past thought in the historian's own mind. End of quote. The historian's job, for him, is to recreate historical events using their own preconceived notions about such events. In other words, he believed that history is subjective. These ideas point us to the fact that history utilizes both objective and subjective research processes. History employs an objective research process, not by finding the laws of history as to how Auguste Comte envisioned it, but by providing proof that a particular past event really happened. It uses inductive reasoning from logic. It deals with probabilities, suppositions, and assumptions about a particular past event. This inductive approach to history involves confirming the provenance of sources and, then, investigating them for clues of the past and/or designating them as proofs that a particular historical event really happened. Sources used in this approach are called primary sources. They are documents written by a person present in a particular event. In other words, they are made by a first-hand witness who saw and/or participated in such an activity. Examples are numerous but not limited to diaries, speeches, letters, interviews, manuscripts, public documents, documentary films, autobiographies, interviews, artistic works, and artifacts. One concrete example was the Diary of Anne Frank, a true story of a Jewish girl who wrote about her life during the Nazi domination of Europe. She was just like any other teenage girl in the midst of the war before getting captured by the Nazi soldiers. Novels could also be considered primary sources. Erich Maria Remarque wrote a novel entitled All Quiet on the Western Front. This novel wrote about the differences between expectations and realities of being on a battlefield during World War I. Novice German soldiers felt very patriotic in going to war, however, they would later see the futility of this great war on the battlefield. Although his book was a fictional one, it portrayed the characters akin to the German people at that time. So, his work could also be classified as a primary source in knowing the social history of Germany during the war. Visual arts such as painting, sculpture, and architecture could be categorized as primary sources, too. They could tell us about the artistic trends during the day and about the personality of the art patron. They could also answer the following questions: why and how did the art patron commission the art? These artistic pieces could also help us discover new perspectives by investigating their supposed and implied meanings. In short, they could be a form of propaganda, mandated by the art patron and/or created by the artist, for the illiterate masses. Aside from the objective manner of getting to know the past, history also uses a subjective research process by using the facts gathered from the inductive research process and interpreting or reinterpreting them to suit the historian's perspectives. In a way, history is similar to art in that historians could manipulate facts to suit the idea they would like to show to their readers. One example involves the historian's interpretation and reinterpretation of the domination of France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, in continental Europe. Most historians tell us that he invaded or controlled many countries in Europe. Most countries previously under the control and influence of Napoleonic France officially believe that he was a conqueror. However, France legally venerates him as a champion for human rights, for example, for abolishing slavery, not only in the country but also in its overseas possessions at that time. Historians also integrate secondary sources in the subjective approach. They are scholarly articles or books written to analyze a historical event. They are based on the author's interpretation, reinterpretation, or even misinterpretation of the said period in order to suit their perspectives or ideas. An example of a secondary source is the book of a journalist, Michael Wolff, Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House, 2018. The author claimed that the then United States President Donald Trump was unfit to be president based on his interviews with White House employees. This book showed the author's negative attitude towards the administration of the said American president. It also shows that historians could scrutinize, criticize, or accept existing historical ideas to form a new perspective of a particular historical event. Now that you know the essential information about the history, you can decide to learn history professionally or informally, self-study. However, remember that you cannot escape history because it is all around you. History is in the news, in places, in movies, in TV series, in blogs, and in books. And if you do not have a basic understanding of history, you will have a hard time comprehending the use of historical references in those kinds of media. Lastly, if you do not know the past, you will not understand the world we are living in. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Also, comment down your thoughts to begin a conversation about history. And share this video to someone who is interested in learning history.